we talk about things like, Targ and his research into ESP and how the government was trying to use that, and UFOs and pilots seeing UFOs. Now we talk about astronauts seeing UFOs. Those types of things is one thing to talk about UFOs as if they were extraterrestrials. But I mean, even more so, try talking to somebody even who believes in extraterrestrials that no. UFOs are not extraterrestrials, but extra dimensional spiritual beings inhabiting genetically modified meat suits to try to, deceive us into thinking there are UFOs.
And they are mingling among us.
Yeah, in order to have spiritual ramifications for the future. I mean, that's the type of stuff, even if you have someone, I mean, for the longest time, I, believed in UFOs in sort of the traditional sense. And, you find somebody else who believes in UFOs and you're like, yes, I have found someone. And now we can talk about UFOs together. But now trying to talk about UFOs with like a secular, ufologist or something. And they're trying to tell you that, the Nordics have come from the constellation, I forget what it is.
Zeta Reticuli.
Sure, yeah. And we're like, no. They're not Nordics from Zeta Reticuli. They are
reptilians from Palladium, Palladia, or whatever.
No, well, they're demons who have inhabited
demons, yes.
Genetically modified suits that the elites have,
Right, and the demons come from disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, who are these giants that lived in the past, that the gods flood, it just destroyed the giants. That's what it was about. Didn't they teach you this in Sunday school? And then they're like, you heretic.
Now all the ufologists are calling us the weirdos.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to this one. Popsci.com, Popular Science. Article titled, "Our First Contact with Aliens Might Be with Their Robots." That's right. Researchers working on Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI, efforts hunt for the same thing that their predecessors sought for decades, a sign that life arose, as Carl Sagan would say, on another humdrum planet around another humdrum star, and rose up into something technologically advanced. It could happen any day. A strange radio signal, a weird brief flash in the night sky, a curiously behaving star with no natural explanation. It could be anything. So SETI researchers are casting a wide net, trekking down as many prominent promising leads as they can. But one thing they've started to realize is that if a civilization from another world follows a similar path to our own, then we may be dealing with a whole different form of brain power. Not a little green person, Vulcan, or strange organism we aren't yet fathoming, but an artificial intelligence. To understand why the first intelligence we meet might be artificial, we have to go back to early efforts to look for life around other stars. SETI researchers started listening to the cosmos on the assumption that aliens might begin radio transmissions as a first advanced technological step if they're at all like us. There's reason to believe that, like our own path, getting from the era of radio to the computing era is a small jump. Quote, by 1900, you had radio. By 1945, you had computers, Seth Shostak, senior scientist at the SETI Institute, says. Quote, it seems to me that's a hard arc to avoid. And from there, it may just be a matter of getting those computers smaller and smaller as they get smarter and smarter. Automated processes learn to adapt on their own, and someday rudimentary intelligence arrives, just as it has here. Quote, there's currently an AI revolution, and we see artificial intelligence getting smarter and smarter by the day. Susan Schneider, an associate professor of cognitive science and philosophy at the University of Connecticut, who has written about the intersection of SETI and AI, says, quote, that suggests to me something similar may be going on at other points in the universe. So what will that look like from our perspective here on Earth?
A microchip.
A microchip, exactly. So, and this is actually a very extensive article that we won't have the time to read all the way through on this program here, but we'll be able to get the point. Basically, what they're saying is, yo, if we are out there looking for aliens to show up in a spaceship, it's probably not going to be how it happens. It's probably going to be a robot that they sent out, much in the way that we have sent out robots. And in order to make it as far as it would take for an alien civilization to get to us, it would have to probably be pretty advanced, a little bit more advanced than our farthest reaching satellite, which is out there somewhere in the void past Pluto there, the former planet, rest in peace. So there you go. So if we're going to come in contact with aliens, at least in the scientific community, because obviously there's a large community who believe that aliens, if you want to talk about extraterrestrials in the classical sense, have already shown up and started abducting people and things like that, and it's a little hard to talk about this from our perspective, because not only have we heard the stories and seen the evidence of extraterrestrials arriving already in their spaceships and coming out as little green men, or the Greys, or whatever you want to call them. Not only is that prevalent in certain societies, but also, I think we're all coming to the conclusion, at least in the areas that you and I are subject to, Gons, that there's more of an interdimensional situation happening there.
Yeah.
So we don't want to. I don't want to trigger anybody out there to try to explain to me what the Great Deception is, and that there's a Nephilim aspect at work there, perhaps.
Yeah, it's really. I think that this is part of the whole blue beam and all this stuff, and the stuff in the sky and everything. It could all begin with a cyber form of communication. And I've always thought that, even in the movies like Contact and stuff, which they bring up in this film, it's sort of it's a digital signal that they decode and they create the blah, blah, blah. And this idea of meeting the AI that they created, and maybe it goes into the whole Matrix concept. The idea that we would interact with these, what did they say here? These different form of brain power, right? These like non-embodied brain power. Christians, not just Christians, like just people in general have said that there's like spiritual beings forever, right? And I just think it's weird that they have to go to this area of like these they get to the point of communicating through a non-physical form. And to us, it seems, just like AI. But when the language is becoming blurred. It's not just like hard material things anymore. It's both material and spiritual because of that digital medium, which is kind of like an in-between where, our human imagination is able to create any kind of world that we can exist in or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like there's there are demonic forces that can really take advantage of that and can really be part of a huge deception. If think about this, and I know we have not talked about this Q thing, but think about how much of a phenomenon this has become. And this is all from alleged leaks coming from top White House people, right? Or the good guys in the government or whatever. Mm-hmm. But think about it. Think about how big the movement became so quickly. And I'm not saying it's I'm not taking sides with it. It's not the point of the discussion. But in a similar fashion, can you imagine some kind of communication that is claimed to be from another planet somewhere far away, but the stuff they claim is coming true, or the news headlines reflect on things they suggest or say days before, that kind of thing. If that kind of stuff starts happening, I mean, I can easily see people jumping on board to this, like, oh, this guy claims to be an alien, or this group of people, and they're doing it. They're telling us stuff. They're showing us stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And just like sort of the opposing view of the Q phenomenon, it wouldn't be hard for somebody to fake that either. SETI could just come out and say, hey, yeah, we found an alien. Yeah, he's saying all this stuff. And then just, the powers that be make the stuff happen.
Right.
But here in popular science, they continue. So why haven't we heard from other civilizations yet? Sure, time and space are vast, and relatively speaking, we just started looking. But there are other limitations to life as well. There's an idea in SETI circles known as the Fermi paradox.
Yes.
If there are technologically advanced civilizations out there, why haven't we heard from them? One solution often proposed is the Great Filter. The Great Filter is the idea that technological progress creates as many problems as it solves. As a society advances to a certain point, those threats can outweigh the benefits, resulting in the wholesale destruction of a civilization. It's possible we've already been through one step towards the Great Filter. The first digital computer was built somewhere between 1939 and 1946, the same time period as the development of the first nuclear weapons. Simply put, some civilizations, whether through global scale climate change, nuclear war, or famine, may kill themselves before they can become truly advanced. Artificial intelligence has even been added onto the list of potential threats at times. The Skynet solution to the Fermi paradox.
Yeah.
So there you go. Maybe why we haven't seen any alien robots landing is because, by the time they get the robots, they've already either bombed themselves or the pizza making robots have already taken over the planet.
Yes.
I'm keeping my eye on those pizza making robots, thinking they're better than my buddy Flippy.
Yeah. The real scary thing is when the robots all realize that they're one entity all across the pancake or whatever we're on.
Then they just keep making more pizzas until the whole universe is pizzas.
They were right. It is a flat Earth. It's one giant pizza.
It's all just a bunch of pizzas making up one big pizza.
And it's a Pizzagate connection. Oh, it all connects, Basil.
Oh no, Q! Somebody tell Q.
Pizza plain cake. Very funny. So yeah, of course they had to yuck it up at the end, and sort of poke fun, albeit in a mild, ambivalent way. But I almost didn't make this video, but it's been a while since I've done one like this, or at least specifically in response to guns or guns and Basil. But I kind of just felt compelled to do it because I kept thinking about it for quite some time. I listened to this yesterday morning And a lot of it has to do with just the information of the numerous articles that Gans and Basil are talking about. Specifically, the one that I saw that caught my attention was about the whole thing of AI and aliens, and this Popular Science article that maybe some of you already saw, on them coming out and saying that maybe when the aliens reveal themselves, it'll be through some version of artificial intelligence, alien artificial intelligence. And obviously that's going to get my attention because that's something I talk about quite a bit on the channel, and was a major focus of, Ethereal, which a lot of you I'm sure have seen. So it's just this irony, right, that it just keeps coming up more and more, and then even people who are still riding the fence and kind of trying to remain uncommitted, even though they kind of have to poke fun at Flat Earth, but then at the same time they can't totally ridicule it, because I think at this point probably like half of their viewership is aware of the fact that they are indeed lying about not just NASA but all sorts of things when it comes to cosmology. And it's just not going away, and it keeps building up. So I'm not trying to do a straight up rebuttal per se in this video, but I'm not sure what I would call it: an exhortation, a plea, a cry, and hopefully I'll be able to try and articulate what I'm getting at more. Because it just blows me away, because this stuff just keeps coming out, right? So Gans has been researching artificial intelligence and its relation to the beast system, and then specifically the image of the beast. And he's actually been very influential on myself and my own research over the years. And again, it was just so many of these pieces that I'd kind of accumulated through watching Canary cry for years, and many other podcasts from Revelations Radio Network and associated figures and researchers and things that were all kind of, in my toolbox per se when coming across enclosed cosmology, and then all of it just sort of cohering together very quickly through this kind of new lens that sort of lined things up in a way that made sense, that had never quite clicked like that before. So I suppose because these guys have played such a role in my own, life, having listened to hours and hours of them talking over the years. And, for a long time, that was just sort of my lifeline, right? Was listening to podcasts. I wasn't even really into YouTube videos for the most part. I prefer to be able to just listen while I do other things. And so I learned a lot of great information, and they're still doing great stuff in a lot of ways. Specifically, Gans is a great researcher. He's a great brother in the Lord. He preaches the gospel straight up. There's no weird false teachings or anything. So at the end of the day, I still uphold him as, a solid voice of biblical truth in the midst of just a crazy arena of all kinds of falsehood and confusion that is the truth community and the conspiracy realm. So perhaps that's why it's something that still just nags at me, because it's like, okay, so even if you want to remain ambivalent or unconvinced or agnostic per se about cosmology and flat Earth, at some point I just feel like it's the silliness and the joking and just the kind of scoffing out of the side of your mouth, just really, I feel like it's going to have to stop sooner or later. Because again, if around half or maybe even more than that at some point, people start to realize that there really is something crazy going on here with all this NASA foolery, and we got SpaceX and all this. I mean, there's no excuse not to look into it and understand why people believe that the ISS is an absolute stage production, because it's just plain as day. So yeah, it still boggles my mind. But yeah, this is a pretty fascinating article by Popular Science, where we've talked about this before, and how the AI narrative and the alien narrative is really starting to merge from the mainstream media, which is interesting, because for a while that was kind of a correlation that I almost wondered if it was a little bit of a stretch or a little bit speculative at the beginning, and now they're just coming out and saying it, and they're talking about things like, the Fermi paradox. And in Ethereal, I included that clip from Jason Silva where he's talking about how there's this theory to explain the Fermi paradox where, advanced civilizations, because they get it so advanced, they eventually transcend physicality and upload themselves into a digital form, into non-physical form, and so they basically slingshot themselves into, a higher dimension, or into a more, a quantum realm or whatever. And so they're out there, but they're undetectable to us because, they exist on higher dimensions and planes and are using technologies and physics that we don't even understand. So they just kind of transcend detectability, right? So there's this very short window where they'd even be using the kind of technology that we're using now and blah, blah, blah. I believe he calls it the transcension hypothesis in that. So that was a great clip that Silva used however many years ago. And that's kind of been one of the central themes where, that was kind of one of those central points where it was like, aha, I see how these narratives are really reinforcing each other and, feeding into one each other, cross-pollinating each other. They're all merging into one narrative, the meta-narrative. And so that's really the whole point of this, right? The whole point of this is why it gets so irksome, where you have researchers who, you go down this whole list of things like exposing the lie of evolution, exposing the lie of the UFO deception, and that aliens are really demonic entities, they're interdimensional, not extraterrestrial. You're exposing the lie of transhumanism, you're exposing the lie of globalism and the one world government, that whole agenda. You're exposing the lies of technocracy, you're exposing the lies of artificial intelligence and how that's all connected. And so all these things are connected, right? And there are all these things that, ironically, when, the clip at the beginning where they're talking about how, in the broader secular UFO community, we're the heretics, right? We're the heretics to talk about aliens are really demons. That's just, you bring that up to so many people who are into UFOs and conspiracy stuff, and you're just one of those religious, nut jobs or those closed-minded Christian people, and, you don't really understand what's really going on. And, everything's just demonic, everything's Satan, right? We get that a lot. But, within the Christian flat earth community, what is amazing is that it's almost unanimous in terms of people understanding all those points. You don't have to spell it out for people, even when they're like brand new to all this stuff, because, for a lot of people, flat earth is it was their entry into all this other stuff, and it was kind of their waking up point. And then they're exposed to all this other stuff that's been around for longer than, the flat earth awakening in 2015 or whatever. But it's amazing how quickly people who have a biblical foundation and start getting into flat earth, all the other pieces just fall into place like so fast. So it really is kind of this dilemma, right, for guys like Basil and Gans who are still trying to kind of expose all that list of things that I just went down, but then still trying to cling to the possibility, at least, or at least not wanting to just come out and say, yeah, what if space is just totally fake? And obviously there's the higher dimensions within the firmament, there's spiritual realms, and however that works and whatever that means, and that kind of opens up possibilities for a certain concept of vastness and infiniteness, because how many dimensions are there? Are they, when human beings venture into those dimensions using occult techniques or technology, is it almost like a holodeck kind of scenario, or like a matrix? From my research, that's really where all that stuff is pointing people to, and is all geared to lead people into exploring spiritual dimensions. And so the archetype of outer space, and that's what I believe space is it's really an archetype, like so many other things, where it serves as sort of a conceptual placeholder for the beyond, for the out there, for the infinite, for the the great unknown, to feed this yearning to explore and to learn and to transcend, right? You have to have somewhere to transcend to in order to preach a message of transcendence, the whole Gnostic message of transcendence. It requires somewhere to go, right? It requires an out. It requires a frontier, the final frontier, right? And so that's what the whole Luciferian eschatology is based on. It's like, is achieving godhood by, transcending physicality, by transcending just being confined to this one planet, and, colonizing the universe, colonizing, first our solar system and then the galaxy and then beyond. And then, of course, that sort of pushes that ties right into transhumanism and technological transcendence and the whole singularity gospel. Because eventually you realize that physicality and rockets and technology are limited in terms of distance and speed and time. So if we can upload our consciousness into some sort of digital form, into some sort of non-physical form, then, that's the answer. If we can somehow access the quantum realm and sort of shortcut all the laws of physics anyways, creating some sort of interdimensional portals or wormholes or whatever. All these things that are ancient occult concepts that have now been kind of given a science fiction embodiment. Outer space is the backdrop for all of that, right? It is imperative. It is an absolute requirement for evolution, for transcendence, for aliens. And of course, so now that the alien narrative is starting to mirror back this idea of the singularity, right? Now that the singularity idea is getting more and more momentum, both through science fiction and movies and everything, but also in the mainstream, the quote-unquote mainstream science. Lots of people, Ray Kurzweil and all these people talking about the singularity, and Elon Musk. So it's almost sort of a foregone conclusion. It's an eventuality that a lot of people are talking about. So if it's an eventuality for our technological progression, then by extension, they logically deduce that singularity would be an eventuality for any civilization, for any species out there that was evolving just like we're evolving, right? So they're going to reach that point where their technology just hits this exponential spike, and they would no doubt create computers and machines, and they would no doubt create software to run those computers and machines, and that software would eventually hit a singularity point of becoming self-aware or super intelligence, and they would merge with that artificial intelligence, and they would hit that singularity point. So, when you kind of follow the logic that's all been laid out in pieces, but now all those pieces are just merging more and more and more, both in the science fiction and in the mainstream. Yeah, they go hand in hand. Singularity and aliens are sort of, whenever you see aliens in the movies, they're always more advanced, unless you're talking about the Ewoks from Star Wars or something. But so yeah, they're just becoming more and more intertwined all the time. So we have all this in common, right? We have all of our brothers and sisters out there who still do see all these parts of the Great Deception. And yeah, it's a tricky thing, because it's going, you just go like, so why are you so hesitant to seriously entertain the idea that this is a fictional construct? This whole cosmological paradigm of Copernicanism was a necessary step that had to be laid, the groundwork had to be laid first in order to recast spiritual entities as alien entities, as higher dimensional beings from some other part of the universe. Why is that so hard to understand? Why is it so hard to understand that there's no Big Bang without the vast Copernican universe? Why is it so hard to understand that without gravity, there's no such thing as cosmic evolution, or without nuclear fusion, there's no such thing as cosmic evolution? That these are concepts that had to be embraced in order for people who are walking around all around us to believe that, we evolved from monkeys and evolved from single-celled organisms in a primordial sea and all these things. None of that has any foundation without space. Just like for us, we defend Genesis and the creation because it's a foundational book for everything else that happens in the Bible. Whereas the Big Bang is kind of the foundation for all the other lives that they've built, and space is a fundamental part of that. Take away space and there's no aliens. There's no universe for other beings to come from. They're coming from right here. So who are they? So maybe I just needed to vent a little bit. Maybe part of it is that, maybe it's a plea for, I don't know, if Gon's, I've tried to get him to watch Ethereal. I've tried to kind of explain some of the ways that I've seen the pieces fit together through this cosmological lens that builds upon the shoulders of so many people coming before us, So it's not like, it's really not anything new discovery. It's just a rediscovery of an ancient Hebrew cosmology that just makes more sense when you put all these pieces back together into it. Just like with the Genesis 6 paradigm, once you start to kind of open that up and give it a chance, there's a lot of people out there that still just believe that Enoch and the Nephilim, that's all just false teaching, and that's just all that's all a lie from the devil, right? And they don't want to stop and think about it because it challenges their paradigm, it challenges their comfort levels, and so they don't want to go there. But when you do, it allows you to realize, it makes the flood make a lot more sense. It makes, the resurgence of giants later makes more sense. Things like Nimrod and all of that. I mean, it fills in a lot of gaps, right? But enclosed cosmology, I think, does even 10 times more. So it is frustrating that there's this wall And when you know that there's a risk, there's a cost, that people who've spent years establishing their ministries and establishing their their presence with their podcasts and their documentaries and stuff, that if they were really to even if you're not just becoming a flat earther, but just saying, hey, I'm not gonna treat this like a joke, that even that alone would cost them. I don't know. I can only speculate because I've never been at that level where you could be part of the Bible prophecy in crowd, the in circle, the prophecy circuit or whatever. There's definitely a sort of a hierarchy, and as limited as it may be, it's there. And so yeah, it's sort of like watching somebody just get slowly backed into a tighter and tighter corner where they have to kind of bite their tongue more and more and straddle a skinnier and skinnier line all the time. But this stuff just keeps coming out, just like all the NASA fakery just keeps mounting and amassing. And it's crazy now, because a few years ago there was so much about the ISS and everything that was, you had to really spend hours and hours scouring for it and really being motivated. And now there's just countless videos where it's all just packaged for you. I don't know how you watch a guy getting his wire grabbed by his fellow astronaut, getting his little trapeze wire just grabbed. There's nothing there, but the guy's grabbing something and he yanks him back. I mean, it's in your face. They're sitting in harnesses. They're hairspraying their hair. All in all, it's just hard to get past the question of, okay, on this side, if we can break it down into two columns, right? All these deceptions that we agree on one side, right? The alien deception and transhumanism, transcendence and singularity and artificial intelligence and all these things that are just blending into one narrative, right? They're just all part of one thing. We know that all that stuff is dependent on space. And then you put all of the core theological doctrines of the Bible, right? Where there's a heaven and a hell. There is the reality of sin. There's the reality of, who God is and the Creator, and that we're fallen, that we need a Savior and a Redeemer. We need the cross. We're called to repentance and believe. We're saved by grace through faith. And there's a judgment. And then now as believers, living in the times that we do, in the context that we're in, we understand that there is an enemy. There is a kingdom of darkness that is at work in the world. The spirit of Antichrist has been at work since the very beginning. And it has just all been building up. And so we understand that there's, spiritual realms, there are spiritual beings. So we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Plenty more things I could list, but, name any single one of them that is dependent upon Copernican cosmology. That if you take away space and you take away belief that stars are millions of light years away and that they're, these massive fusion centers of gases and atoms, and that everything's held together by gravity or whatever. You name one, not even just a central doctrine of the gospel, but name anything from the Bible, any snippet of Christian theology that hinges upon Copernican cosmology. So all the things that we're all in agreement on in terms of what we're against, what we're exposing, there's plenty of it that is absolutely dependent upon Copernican cosmology. So for me, that's the point that I feel like, if we could at least hammer that home, we could at least say, hey, I get that you are scared of looking stupid and being unscientific and uneducated and falling for some trick, right? The whole line about flat Earth is just there to make the truthers look stupid and make Christians look stupid and make creationists look stupid. Oh, I'm not falling for that. I get that. I get that fear. I had that knee-jerk reaction myself, and, I laughed at it. But when you really stop and break it down, at the end of the day, if you're still in that place where you're right on the fence, or you're just tempted to want to write it off and make fun of it, break it down like that, from just a cold, calculated, doctrinal perspective. Which one is more threatened by the possibility of space being exposed as a fraud and NASA being exposed as a fraud? Our identity in Christ isn't threatened whatsoever. The gospel's not threatened whatsoever. Things that are threatened are things like nationalist pride and patriotism, and or our affinity for all kinds of science fiction that we've grown up with, for dreaming about space and fantasies essentially. None of that is real though. It threatens our humanistic pride, or militaristic pride, or nationalistic pride, or our sense of having a grip on the way things work, the way history has broken down over the centuries. It threatens a lot of those things, which again I would say are not harmonious with following Jesus. But it doesn't threaten the gospel. In fact, it has brought many, many, many people to the gospel. Not all. Obviously, there's a lot of people in Flat Earth that are into lots of other spiritual lies just as well, and I've talked a lot about that. So it's a mixed bag. It's a spectrum, just like everything else. But yeah, the alien lie needs space. So if we don't believe in aliens, we know that that's a deception. What does the Christian need space for? The only thing that really anyone ever is able to come back with is the idea that it glorifies God by knowing about just the vastness of the universe and all these galaxies and just this mind-boggling void, right? Which, if you believe the mainstream narrative of science and astronomy and how all that was discovered, then the majority of humanity has never been able to appreciate that anyways. The majority of humanity throughout all of history has just looked up at the sky and saw twinkling stars and the sun and moon and had their primitive, mystical, comprehensions of things, but they didn't understand it the way this small fraction of people today have, since we were able to build telescopes. But even then, even with things like Hubble or the deep field photographs and all these things that they say are how we discovered exoplanets. That like they didn't even supposedly discover planets outside of our own solar system until 1998. It was all just theoretical up until that point. They only quote unquote discovered it, and even then, the discoveries of planets are just pixels. It's just based on a pixel, which is, they say, is a star that's millions of light years away, and if it blinks in a certain way, they deduce that that's a planet passing in front of the star, and then from that they extrapolate all the other information about the size of the planet and what it's made out of, and it's absolutely ridiculous. So much of what we think is just established scientific fact about astronomy is just speculation and abstract math and imagination, and believing in a narrative that you're already convinced is true. And it's a narrative based on evolution. And, well, many Christians just keep cherry-picking things from it all over the place, but still don't want to look at it in its entirety. They don't want to see that it's all designed to bring us to the place where we are now, where people are talking about alien AI somehow contacting us. And, coincidentally, right at the same time that we're working fervently to create AI ourselves. And there's so many ways that all of that combined could unfold, right? Maybe there's good AIs and bad AIs, and we got to create our own AI to save ourselves from the alien AIs, or maybe the alien AIs are benevolent and they're going to come save us from our own Skynet nightmare. There's so many different ways they could play it, but it's ironic to me, and I'm going to finish with this, but it's ironic because, for most of us, for a long time, when we're talking about prophecy and eschatology and the whole idea of Jesus returning, and every eye, there's the verse that says every eye will see him, and a very common interpretation of that for a long time was that, well, it's because of technology. We're going to have TV, and then the internet came along, and then smartphones, and then it was like, oh, the idea that everyone on earth could see Jesus returning because it'll be televised, we'll all see it through our technology. But then you start re-examining that, that's one of the verses that takes on a whole new meaning from an enclosed cosmology, from a flat earth perspective. Suddenly it's like, wait, no. Every eye will see him. It's literal, like everyone on the earth will see him descending from the clouds at the same time. It's not through technology. But then conversely, what's interesting is that the whole idea of disclosure or an alien invasion, or that day where the alien motherships start appearing all over cities, in movies and things like that, we've seen it portrayed. Obviously, it would be televised and on the news and all that, but it's something that I think for the most part, you envision seeing the mothership in the sky, seeing it come down visually, literally. But it's interesting to think about the idea that, well, however much of that with Project Bluebeam they might be able to pull off, if fundamentally what was really at the core of some sort of crazy alien invasion, if it was actually far more something taking place in a technological aspect, if people really bought into the idea of an alien artificial intelligence that somehow started manifesting itself through our whole technological grid, or the internet of everything that we're madly trying to build, right? Basically, imagine just like a worldwide poltergeisting of our whole civilization, where the aliens, the quote-unquote alien AIs, just showing up randomly wherever and causing all kinds of chaos and interacting with people. And I mean, there would be all kinds of reactions and all kinds, who knows? It would just be, it's pretty crazy to imagine. But if, obviously if we understand that these are demonic spirits, and they have the ability to manipulate, electromagnetic forces, such as electricity. They're able to talk through computers and talk through technology and haunt the internet, poltergeisting the world, right? To where really, truly, every eye would see the quote-unquote aliens just through the technology that we're all carrying around and that we're all interacting with and that we're all completely dependent upon. To me, that's the thing that I see as being way more likely. Even if, at the same time, they could be, you could have aerial phenomenon and orbs and lights in the sky and all kinds of crazy things. And that would only reinforce the belief that people were actually, if some sort of intelligence started manifesting through your television or whatever, people would believe that it was really whatever it said. I'm an ancient being from Zeta Reticuli, and, I'm talking to you through your smartphone or whatever. Wouldn't shock me at this point. It really wouldn't. But then again, all the people buying into the alien spin, the alien lie, they needed that foundation. They needed that belief in outer space and the idea that all over the universe, spontaneous generation of life is occurring, that, the life is evolving just like it did here and building technology to their own singularity point, and now here they are. And this is what we've been, waiting for. We've been waiting for this disclosure moment, and now it's all infused with technology and artificial intelligence and our own question of are they going to help us with our own jump to the singularity, our own quantum leap? Obviously, there's going to be some beings that are playing the role of the benevolent ones and the ascended masters who want to help us, not destroy ourselves and all that stuff. So obviously that's very speculative, but at the end of the day, it's like, what do you need space for other than for all these lies that you're trying to already expose? Which part of the gospel suffers if some, ignorant flat earther, quote unquote, believes we're living on a pancake? So that to me was just the irony of it all, the ufology heretics, right? I mean, being a flat earther is kind of like the ultimate heretic. From not just the ufologists, but the mainstream people, the mainstream scientists, the evolutionists, and then all the mainstream, even creation ministries and most Christians at the world who still want to believe that, overall humanity is, we could never be that badly deceived. I think so much of it just boils down to just hitting a psychological wall where you think no, that lie is just too big. That's just too impossible. We're not that dumb. We're not that easily tricked. You have to believe that you've been watching all kinds of stuff that's just a play. That's what it is. And you have to be humble enough to be able to accept that. So, that's my rant.